Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, grinding those curves. So this week I got a note from a Patreon subscriber named Michael Day who said that he liked blades with really curvy shapes, but he was having trouble grinding them. So I thought I'd use that as a jumping off point for just talking about grinding curved surfaces generally, and then we'll kind of get into bevels specifically. I promise I'm going to get over to the grinder in a second, but a couple principles here just in terms of how to go about grinding. First thing is, trust your ability to do it right. Just stay calm, have an approach, understand what it is that you're trying to do, and don't poke at it. Don't, try it, get scared and wobble all over the place. Commit yourself to something. Just be sort of firm and just move right through it. If you're tentative, you'll goof up complicated grinds and curvy grinds for sure. Second point, cheat. Always cheat when you can. Use curves that are already out there in the world to do your work for you. Don't reinvent the wheel, literally. First and foremost, anytime that you can use the machine to impose a curve on your knife, just do it. Wheels especially. Also, use forms, dividers, can lids. Anything can be used to scribe a line onto a piece of steel and give you a little bit of a guide that will make that grind a little easier because you know where you're going. You can scribe the shape of that bevel using dividers, and it gives you that line that you can chase and try and keep the whole thing clean. Alright, so let's get started by doing a blade that has a nice simple curved shape. There's nothing complicated about this. We're basically just going to be showing the most basic techniques, and then we'll kind of build on those as we move forward. Alright, one last quick point here. In most of my videos, of course, I'm showing steel being ground. In this particular video, I'm actually going to be grinding micarta blanks that are sort of shaped vaguely like knives. Might look a little bit goofy, but first, it goes a little faster, and second, there are some features about micarta that we'll pick up on as we go that'll help illustrate some of the points that I'm making here. Now, I've talked about basic bevel grinding technique in several videos, but let's review. The most important thing is that the blade angle stays the same all the way through, from tang to tip. So in order to get the curve here, don't change your bevel angle, change your distal angle. In other words, your platen stays vertical like this, so the angle with the blade with respect to the platen stays the same from stem to stern. The only thing that changes is this, the angle of the blade front to back with respect to the platen. Now I should add, some people like to do it this way, by rotating the whole blade, but here's the funny thing. The end result geometrically is exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the pattern of the scratch marks. The geometry, bevel angle, all that exactly the same. So what you'll notice here on the micarta is that the layers expose themselves so that they follow the exact curve of the blade. That means that you're taking off the exact same amount of material at the exact same angle. If you changed angles as you got closer to the end, the distance between the layers would narrow, but they don't. Same angle all the way. Let me illustrate this a different way on a piece of wood. So now we've got this big exaggerated bevel. Let's jump over to the bandsaw. See, if we took a protractor to each one of these pieces, it would be the same angle, same angle, same angle every time. Okay, so that's the easy case. Let's turn specifically to the question we were setting out to address here, which is how to grind curvy blades. Now, there are a lot of different styles of blades that you might call curvy, so let's break down a few of the possibilities. First, you've got blades that have some kind of positive curvature built into them. The Japanese tanto, for example, or Persians, things like that. Positive curvature means that it's shaped like a sharpened banana, with the edge here. Now, there's nothing intrinsically more difficult about this than a blade that doesn't bend or that has a drop point. The basic thrust of what you're doing is just to maintain that same bevel angle, same as a straight knife. Now, what I would typically do is to grind it so that the spine is perpendicular to the platen at all times, so you're sort of rotating the whole knife. And of course, you have to do the same thing that you did on your straight knife, which is to say, change the angle a little stem to stern in order to give some distal taper. At the end of the day, you're doing the exact same thing as you were with the earlier one. I could just go straight across and it would work fine, but for me, rotating it just makes it a little easier. So next we're going to move on to blades that have some kind of interior curve. Simplest case, you have a blade like a karambit, which just has the cutting edge on the interior side of a curved blade. The first thing to recognize is that the flat platen is just not built to do this. If you're going to, you have to use the platen in a way that it wasn't really designed for. Hang the belt off the edge and grind only on the corner of the platen, or just do it very gingerly. If you press in really hard, what'll happen is that the corners will cut in and you'll have these two big divots 2 inches apart cut into your blade somewhere. Now, another alternative is to actually alter the shape of your platen. You round it off just a hair from side to side. Now, I've put a piece of micarta on my platen to mimic how this works. Bear in mind that the radius of this shape is only going to naturally fit with one radius of interior curve. Too much radius on the platen, it'll tend to dig in. Not enough, you'll have the same old problem as you would with a flat one where the corners are going to dig in. Now, I've kind of exaggerated it here. Really, just a very, very small amount of radius is plenty to give you a good interior curve. Couple of points. If you're going to take this approach, try out several different kinds of belts. J-flex belts, for instance, are much more flexible, so they'll hug that surface a little more easily than, say, Y-weight, which are really hard. Try different types of belts and see what works best for you. So that's a good little segue here to mention my sponsor, Combat Abrasives. As I've said many times, I really recommend using different kinds of belts, different grits, testing all kinds of different belts out. And let's face it, every time you buy a belt, you're having to plunk down some money. So you want to feel like you're getting bang for your buck. Combat Abrasives is an American-owned company making belts right in the USA and selling them direct to you. So you're getting good belts at good prices, and that gives you the opportunity as a maker to try a wide variety of belts and really find the ones that'll up your game. CombatAbrasives.com. Alright, so now we're going to start getting a little deeper into this, and we're going to talk about compound curves. Now, there are umpteen different kinds of compound curves. I'm going to start with a fairly simple one that we are going to do on a knife that I make called the Bushido. As you can see, basically the main body of the blade is straight, and then the tip has its own separate curvature. So you can really think of them as two completely separate knives at first. So the key to compound grinds is that you have to sort of look at each one as a separate chunk. Now, you may be able to get through the whole thing in one pass, but as a general rule, I recommend that you start with one of the curves and then move to an additional curve. Let's show you how this might work. So I break it down to, here's knife number one, it's dead straight. So I'll grind that all the way out, just going straight out, cutting on into that second section of the blade. Now here's knife two, slight positive curvature. I'll switch over to that once I've got the previous section laid in, and then I'll grind that section. The key here is to go really easy at the transition. If you grind too hard at the transition, get too aggressive, you'll burn through, you'll make the edge too thin, you'll cut a big divot into the edge, and you'll have to start all over. You might even ruin the blade. So now I hope we finally circled around to the point that we originally started at here, which is what Michael Day was referring to as really curvy knives. But in this specific case, we're going to talk about the recurve. So the recurve is very challenging because it really incorporates all the three things that we were just talking about before. Interior curves, exterior curves, compound curves. So you're really juggling a lot of stuff here, and frankly, you know, this is not a beginning knife making project here. But I know a lot of people are interested in it, so let's jump right on into it. Some guys will alter their platens so that they have a flat section, say on the bottom, and then a little curved section up at the top for doing that interior curve. The belly or the exterior curve, that's this part up in the front, is then ground on the flat platen, and the interior curve is done up on the curved part. I've never made myself a platen like that, but again, here I'll just use this mock-up to show how this would work. Now another approach, and I'm not showing it here, is to use a hollow grind for recurves. If you do that, you can generally do the entire blade in one pass as opposed to breaking it down into sections. And there we have it. So if you look at these micarta blade shapes we've ground, you'll see that no matter what type of grind you're doing, the basic principle stays the same. The lines are parallel from one end to the other. Recurve, positive curve, negative curve, compound curve, doesn't matter. All the same. Works just the same on a piece of steel like this agent as it does on micarta. Well, I hope that helps you get a handle on making these curves a little more consistently. You know, beyond the basic recurve that we just talked about, there are all kinds of tricky grinds. Nightmare grinds, weird compound grinds. The more complex the grind, the more you'll probably want to modify your equipment or use more specialized grinding surfaces, you know, that are intended for specific situations. Bottom line, the more complex the grind, the more that you may need to develop kind of special grinding surfaces and techniques to accomplish what's in your mind. Thanks for watching, guys. If you feel like you got something out of this video, don't forget to subscribe. Also, click on the link to Patreon for a great way to give back to the channel. Plus, check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Links in the description. If you want something sharp and pointy, maybe a gift for yourself or one of the cooler people in your life, check out my Tactics Armory website and pick up one of our tactical or outdoor knives. And finally, if you want to learn to make Hamones or Japanese swords, check out WalterSorrellsBlades.com, where you can find videos about how I make Hamones, as well as forging, mounting, polishing, and fittings for Japanese swords. Thanks, and see you soon.